I won't be the first to point out that this story might just be the worst case of journalistic malpractice in living memory. It's up there with the lies that started the Iraq War. This article directly contributes to the massacre of thousands of people. Thousands. And there will not be any consequences. You probably saw this story by the New York Times back in December of 2023. It was a bombshell report. There was evidence of mass sexual assault on October 7th. Maybe it wasn't just an oppressed people resisting their executioners. Maybe these were the barbarians at the gates. This story was a key galvanizing force in uniting the West in support of Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign. And if the average person were to read the article, it seems pretty damning. Wow, they say there's overwhelming evidence. Who could possibly defend these monsters? There's only one problem. Well, two problems. One, there wasn't any evidence. And two, it was written by an IDF soldier with no journalism experience and attributed to another writer. A brilliant expose by The Intercept revealed just how absurd the story actually was. This is Anat Schwartz, Israeli filmmaker and former IDF intelligence official. She was approached by the New York Times to work on a story about sexual violence on October 7th. Schwartz was hesitant, recounting on Israel's Channel 12 podcast that she had, quote, no qualifications, and on another podcast that, quote, it was more of a case of the New York Times having to convince me. She got over her initial hesitancy and agreed to work with Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Jeffrey Gettleman on the story. Gettleman, a veteran reporter for the Times, typically does much of the legwork for his stories. But interestingly, in this case, it was the complete novice who did most of the on-the-ground reporting. Gettleman acted more as an assembler for the data Schwartz provided. On the podcast, she would make it clear that the Times already had their preferred story in mind, that there was indeed mass sexual violence on October 7th. All she had to do was deliver the details. She went on to recount her extensive efforts to find any evidence whatsoever to support the claims. She called every hospital, crisis center, hotline, trauma recovery center, and psychiatric doctor in Israel, and not one of them reported a single instance of assault. This was a problem for the Times, so she kept digging, looking for anything that could at least suggest that the paper's claims were legitimate. Eventually, and by her own admission against her best judgment, she cited an extremist group with a long history of debunked lies, and the IDF reservist who started the false rumor of a baby being cut from its pregnant mother and beheaded. That did not happen. Even the Israeli media had to walk that one back. Of course, the New York Times didn't feel the need to mention the soldiers' lack of credibility. Even family members of killed Israelis deny the stories, with the sister of one victim saying their story doesn't make sense, and her brother-in-law saying the media invented it. And this is a difficult topic to talk about, because every single decent person on Earth is against sexual violence. People who perpetrate such acts should be locked up for life, and that's being generous. But when the world's most respected newspaper fabricates a story, provides knowingly bogus evidence, and weaponizes these accusations in the service of getting the American people to support genocide, that is evil. It's a powerful accusation because you can't argue against it without mountains of data. You can't just wave off accusations of sexual violence, and that makes it very difficult for the average person to push back on propaganda like this. Thankfully, The Intercept has now provided that evidence, and I would highly recommend you all bookmark it to send to people who try to use debunked lies to legitimize their support for the genocide of the Palestinians.